So in this lesson, we're going to look at the volume of rectangular prisms. We're going to look at examples where we're given the volume. We're going to work backwards when we're we're going to look at examples when we're not given the volume and we're finding it. And we're also going to look at examples working backwards where we are given the volume, but we have a missing dimension. So first off, volume. Volume is the amount of space that a 3D object occupies. So it's important when you're thinking about volume that you're thinking about three-dimensional objects. If you just have a circle on a sheet of paper, you cannot find the volume of that. That would just be area. So go ahead and get out your volume and surface area formula sheet so that you can write some of this down. You might have to pause the video because I'm just going to move ahead here. So here we have a picture of a rectangular prism, and we have the formula. So volume equals big B times H. And we had talked about how the big B represents the area of the base. And so here we have the base, and we know that the base of a rectangle is simply base times height. So here we have a fish tank as an example, and we're going to find the volume of this. So the base of the fish tank is going to be right here. And so that is 2 times 2. Now the height of the fish tank is from one base to the other. And so that's going to be 3. And now we're going to simply calculate the area. So volume equals big B times H. Volume equals, the base is 2 times 2, and the height is 3. So volume equals 2 times 2 is 4, and then times 3, so volume equals 12. And so the area of this is going to be 12 feet cubed. So let's get into the first example. All right, here we have a rectangular prism, and our formula is volume equals big B times H. And so we want to find first the base. And so here is the base of our prism, okay? And so I'm going to put some parentheses around here. We have 10 times 6 because that's the base times height of this rectangle. Then we want to find the height of the prism. Now remember, if that's one base, this is also a base, and so the height of the prism goes from one base all the way to the other, and so that's going to be 12 centimeters. Now, when I work this out, I get 10 times 6, which is 60, times 12. I gotta get a calculator here. Sorry, I was unprepared. All right, so we have 60 times 12, which is going to be 720 centimeters cubed. And remember, it's centimeters cubed because we did centimeters times centimeters times centimeters. All right, let's take a look at another example here with some decimals. So again, our formula is volume equals big B times H. Now our base is right here and right here. And so it has a base of 1.75 and the height of that rectangle is 2. And I get that from the other side there. So I'm going to set up my parentheses. So 1.75 times 2. Now the height of the prism is going to go from one rectangle to the other. And so that's going to be 3.2. Now when you do 1.75 times 2, you're going to get 3.5 times 3.2, which is going to be 11.2 inches cubed. I just realized that was a U try, but that's okay. Let's take a look at a word problem here. So you have a cereal box that has a height of 12.5 inches, a length of 8 inches, and a width of 3 1/4 inches. So what's interesting about this problem is it's mixing whole numbers, fractions, and decimals. So first it wants us to draw a picture. So we're going to do that here to the best of our ability. kind of a crooked cereal box, but that's okay. So it says the height of the prism is going to be 12.5 inches. And then it's talking about the base. So we have a length of 8 inches and a width of 3 1/4 inches. Okay, now let's go ahead and actually solve. So we're going to use volume equals big B times H. Volume equals, we're going to focus on the base right here, which is the same as this base right here. And that's going to be 8 times 3 1/4. Now I'm going to change that 3 1/4 to a decimal so that it's easier to work with. And so I'm going to change it to 3.25. And then times the height, which is from one base to the other base, and that's going to be 12.5. So volume equals, let me grab my calculator here, so we're going to do 3.25 times 8, and we get 26 times 12.5, and we get 300, volume equals 325 inches cubed. All right, you go ahead and try this one since I took your other you try from you. Make sure that you draw the picture and you label it appropriately. All right, go ahead and pause if you're not done. And if you are done, let's take a look. So here I drew a container, and your container may look different, that's okay, but it should be labeled properly. So our actual base should be labeled as 8.5 and 4, and then the height of the prism, which goes, here's the other base, the height which goes from one base to the other should be 5. So volume equals big B times H. I changed the 8 1/2 fraction into a decimal, so I did 8.5 times 4. I got 34, and then times the height of 5 is 170 inches cubed. All right, now we're going to take a look at still the volume of a rectangular prism, but with a much different characteristic. So here we have a cube, which is also a rectangular prism, and it's saying that each side length of each cube is 1/2 an inch. And what that means, before I start to show you how to calculate it, is that is 1/2 an inch, that is 1/2 an inch, and that is 1/2 an inch. And so each one of these cubes has a side length of 1/2 an inch. And I'm going to go ahead and erase that. We're going to use the exact same formula in order to solve. So I'm going to write that down first. Volume equals big B times H, where the big B is going to be our base. Okay, so if each side length is 1/2, that means I have 1/2, 1/2, and 1/2. And so that's going to be 1/2 times 3. Okay, then here I'm going to have 1/2, 1/2, and 1/2. And so again, that's going to be 1/2 times 3. And then here I'm going to have 1/2, 1/2, and 1/2. And so that's going to be 1/2 times 3. Okay, now because it's a cube, they are all squares, and so they're all the same, and so the height is going to match the base. But let's go ahead and calculate. So let's imagine that down here we have the base. Okay, so this guy right here is going to be the base, which would match this guy up here. So 1/2 times 3 is going to be 3 over 2. 1/2 times 3 is going to be 3 over 2. And then the height of the prism is, again, 1/2 times 3, which is 3 over 2. Now, remember, fractions are very, very easy to multiply. So let's do our parentheses first. 3 times 3 is 9 over 2 times 2, which is 4. And then we have times the height. So 9 times 3, and I'm going to write the answer down here, is 27 over 4 times 2 is 8. And that's going to be inches cubed. And that's how we get the answer to these. So there's really just one more step involved. You're calculating the individual side lengths of the cubes. Let's take a look at another example here. So in this case, each side length of each cube is 1/4 of an inch. Now remember, we're going to use the same volume. Volume equals base times height. And put my parentheses there. So here we have the base. I'm going to try to outline it properly here. Here's our base, and then here is our height from one base to the other. So if each is 1/4, this is 1/4, that's 1/4, and that's 1/4. So that's going to be 1/4 times 3. Then we have the height, 1/4, 1/4, and 1/4. So that's 1/4 times 3. The height of the actual base. And then we have the height of the prism. 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, and I lost count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's going to be 1/4 times 6. So 1/4 times 3 and 1/4 times 3 is simply 3 over 4. And then the height of the prism, and what's really important here is that you recognize that you can cross cancel. So that's 6 over 1, and that's going to become a 2, and that's going to become a 3. And so that is 3 over 2. Now, if you simplify within the problem and make sure that all of these fractions here are simplified, you do not have to simplify a large number at the end. So it's always easier to simplify a 6 and a 4 instead of a 526 and a 78. All right, let's work within our parentheses first. So we have 3 times 3, which is 9, over 4 times 4, which is 16, and then times, 3 over 2. So 9 times 3 is going to be 27, and then 16 times 2 is going to be 32. And our units are inches, and so that is inches cubed. All right. You go ahead and try this one. All right, go ahead and hit pause if you're not done. So this one actually worked out really nicely. You didn't end up with any fractions as long as you simplified within the problem. So here our base was 2 units long, and so it's 1/2 times 2, which simplifies down to 1. And then the height of the base was also 1/2 times 2, which simplifies down to 1. Then you have the height of the prism, and it was 1, 2, 3, 4 units long. So 1/2 times 4, which simplifies down to 2. So 1 times 1 is 1, and 1 times 2 is 2. And so you have a total of 2 inches to the third power. All right, go ahead and try this one. All right, go ahead and pause if you're not done. So here we have each side length of the cube of each cube as measuring 1/8 of an inch. And so I'm going to focus first on the base, which is down here. And so I have 1, 2, 3 units at 1/8 each. So 1/8 times 3, which is going to be 3/8. Then the height of the prism, or sorry, the height of the base is 2 units long. So 1/8 times 2. Now I was able to simplify that down to 1/4. And then the height of the prism is 1/8 times, excuse me, times 4 units, which I was able to simplify down to 1/2. Excuse me. So I first simplified the inside of the parentheses. 3 times 1 is 3, 8 times 4 is 32, and then I multiplied that times the height of the prism, which is 1/2. So 3 times 1 is 3, and 32 times 2 is 64. Now remember, like I said before, as long as you simplify over here during this stage, you will never have to simplify over here as you're just multiplying. All right, now let's switch gears and find some missing dimensions, okay? So here I have a rectangular prism, and I give you the volume. I give you the full dimensions of the base, which is 4 by 6, but I do not give you the height of the actual prism, okay? So let's go ahead and figure that out there. So volume equals base times height. And you know what? I messed that up. I'm sorry, let's backtrack. Here is the base, and they give you the height of the prism. They don't give you the height of the base. Okay, so in this case, we know what V is. It's 84. So 84 equals. Now our big B, remember, is base times height of the base. So 4 times H. And then we are given the height of the prism, which is 6. So let's begin to simplify. I'm going to divide both sides by 6 to get rid of that times 6. And so these are going to cancel. And then we have 84 divided by 6, which is 14, equals 4H. Divide by 4 on both sides. And so 14 divided by 4 is going to give us a height of 3.5 meters. Now, when you're finding the missing dimension, it is not meters cubed, it's not meters squared, it's just meters, because all it is one of these dimensions. Okay, and remember when you multiply them all together, meters, meters, and meters, then you'll get meters to the third power. All right, let's look at this example here. So again, I have my base right here, and I have the base of my base, but I'm missing the height of my base. I do have the height of the entire prism. And I know that these words are a little confusing because they're repetitive. So I am given my volume, 165 equals. Now I have 2 times h, which is just 2h, and I have the height of the entire prism, which is 11. So I'm going to divide both sides by 11. And so 165 divided by 11 is going to give me 15 equals 2h. I'm going to now divide both sides by 2, and the height of my base is going to be 7.5 feet. There you go. All right, you go ahead and try this one. All right, go ahead and hit pause if you're not done. And if you are done, let's take a look. So this is a box of dog treats here, and it gave us the volume of 162. So we have 162 equals. Now it gave us all of the dimensions here for the base. So 4.5 times 4, and actually I should have had these together here, but it's missing the height of the entire prism. So we call that x. So 162 equals 4.5 times 4 is 18. So and 18 times x is 18x. Divide both sides by 18 and you end up with x equals 9 inches. All right, go ahead and try this refrigerator. All right, go ahead and hit pause if you're not done. So here we have a refrigerator with a volume of 94.5 feet cubed. The base of the refrigerator is right here. It gives us the height of the prism, but we're missing the height of the actual base. And so we have 94.5 equals 3x times 7. I divided both sides by 7, and I got 13.5 equals 3x. And when I divided each side by 3, I got x is 4.5 feet. All right, that is the end of this one. It was a lot of information, and so we will spend lots of time practicing.